Hosking. This is an of Classic Fights. Joining me, as always, is Tassie Brown, Peter Matiadis, and Mike Altamura. How are we, boys?
Great to be on the show.
Good stuff.
Good, Lyndon.
Well, tonight's a little bit different. We're going to, as I said before, Classic Fight. So this is where we have a particular fight, we revisit it, we dissect it, watch some highlights of it, and just give a little bit of a breakdown on how we saw it. So I'm going to take the reins tonight. We will rotate this around weekly, but I've chosen this week one of the classics of the past, the super fight, Marvellous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard. This fight took place April 6th, 1987, Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, for the WBC Middleweight Championship. Interesting that the WBA and IBF both stripped Hagler of the title for fighting Leonard, but I don't think this is probably one of those fights where I suppose titles didn't matter. It was all about the fight itself. So a few little facts and figures of the fight. Marvin Hagler got a guaranteed $12 million purse with a percentage of revenue. Leonard $11 million with a percentage of the TV rights. And I think from what I've read, Hagler took home a total of about $20 million, Leonard about $12 million. Now the reason that Hagler took home more money is that he, I suppose, bent over for some conditions for Leonard. One of them was a 12-round fight instead of a 15-round fight. I was in a 22-foot ring, and they wore 10-ounce gloves instead of 8-ounce gloves. So I hope I've got it right. Mike, mate, you might have been a little bit young when this fight happened. What can you remember about it?
Well, I mean, I remember actually probably one of the earliest boxing magazines I picked up that was selling this particular tape here, which I'm sure we've all either hired or bought at some job. But this was really like, when you think of boxing, outside of the Mike Tyson tapes, where there was the right stuff and a number of other Tyson videos documenting, Tyson's greatest hits, things of that nature, that was really the first commercial boxing videotape that went mainstream. So I remember, like,
and you had to own it.
Ring magazine having it, Hagler Leonard in your own living room, and because the fight was one, like you said, the fight back then ran on pay-per-view / closed circuit. So in terms of its visibility around the world, it was something where, if you happen to catch it at the right time, you catch it on TV outside of the United States. Otherwise, VHS was the way to go. So, I mean, I'd heard for years growing up, I grew up a big Ray Leonard fan. Hagler, I come to appreciate as time evolved. And as you grow up, you hear that it was a contentious decision, but when you're 8, 9 years of age, you don't really know how to process that. And I remember when I was about 11, I finally managed to get my hands on the tape and watching it and thinking, what contention? I was enamored by Leonard's hand speed, the quick flurries, the flashiness. No one will forget that wind-up right hand to the body in the 4th round. And then what happens is, as you evolve with your knowledge of the sport, you start to think as time passes, wait a second, maybe I have to revisit this, because a lot of people that are respected in the sport suggest that Hagler was on the end of a raw deal. And maybe I was just swayed by Leonard's flashiness. And, I'll hold back on what my perspective is till a little bit later. But I think that what this fight really highlights and why it is such a classic is, firstly, both guys were working nonstop for 12 rounds. That is, and Hagler being a great champion, a little bit older, even though he was, 32 when they fought. But he was 32 going on 40 in terms of his career trajectory, but he never stopped trying. He never stopped coming. And Leonard's movement early in the fight was unbelievable. When you look at it, it was two guys. I'm not going to say they're at the height of their powers, because they both probably peaked at different points. But it was just a beautiful crescendo when they were both in the ring, because it was such a contrast styles. And it was, is the hunter going to be able to maraud and catch the rabbit? And then, when the rabbit started to fade and get weary in Leonard, was he going to be strong enough to hold off the hunter? Was he going to be able to evade capture, to escape? And I think that the clash of styles is what made it so fascinating, and that's why it was such a big box office hit. You know, it's one of those fights that was estimated at the time to have raised about $80 million in revenue. And the title says it itself, the super fight. You know, there was other super fights in the 80s, but this is the fight that stood up because Leonard was moving up in weight. One fight in 5 years.
We'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks again, guys. Hope to see you again next week.